There's been a lot of moves in a short amount of time this offseason, and if you haven't kept up with the NFL offseason, then you may have missed big free agency moves like Sam Darnold going to the Seahawks, Milton Williams going to the Patriots, Davante Adams going to the Rams, and Justin Fields going to the Jets. There were also a few big trades like DK Metcalf going to the Steelers and Geno Smith going to the Raiders too. And there are several hundred transactions every offseason, and it's hard to keep track of in real time, but now that the NFL has slowed down where there are not big transactions seemingly every hour, it is a good time to discuss the best NFL free agents still available. I know we are near the end of May, and obviously the first few waves of free agency has taken place, as well as the NFL draft, but there are a lot of talented players still out there, and in today's video we're going to break down why these guys are still free agents, the impact they could have for a team in 2025, and potential landing spots too. And there is a lot to break down in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video with Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is coming off of a year with the Bears in which he had 70 receptions for 744 yards and 7 touchdowns, and it was a very frustrating year for not just Keenan, but the Bears as a whole. Keenan has been a really good player throughout his career, as he has nearly 1,000 career receptions, as well as over 11,000 career yards, and is a 6-time Pro Bowler. I know when guys at skill positions get above the age of 30, there's usually an eyebrow raised, which is more or less a question of how long can this guy keep doing it. And Keenan's 744 yards in 2024 were the lowest he's had in a season since all the way back in 2016, in which he tore his ACL in week 1, but I don't think this is a case of Keenan simply not having it anymore. Sure, he may not be the player he was 5 or 6 years ago, but he's not a bad player by any means. He did have the lowest catch percentage of his career last year, as he hauled in just 57.9% of his targets, and yes, he had a couple of drops, but I still think he is a solid route runner and can be a contributor on a contending team. And at this point, the furthest Keenan Allen has been in the postseason is the divisional round of the playoffs. And for a guy who is near 1,000 receptions and a player who will certainly be in the Hall of Fame discussions when the time comes, as again, he is a 6-time Pro Bowler and a 6-time 1,000-yard receiver, why not go sign with a team you think can win the Super Bowl? And one thing that I think gets forgotten about with Keenan Allen specifically is he just had 1,200 yards in 2023 in 13 games. Keenan averaged the highest yards total per game in his career at 31 years old in 2023, and he was obviously never a Jameson Williams type burner where if he had a big injury that essentially the speed was gone and he would be a completely different player. No. For anyone who remembers, Keenan ran a very slow 40 at 21 years old, and he certainly isn't running a 4.3 at 33 years old. This is a really good veteran player, a tough football player, and a guy who gets it, and to be completely honest, I don't understand why he's still a free agent. There's so many young quarterbacks in the NFL in today's era that if I needed a receiver to help out my young quarterback, I would love to bring Keenan to my team and to help my young quarterback grow. I would be willing to overpay a bit at this point because he's still a really solid football player, but right now he's undoubtedly one of the best free agents available. Veteran corner Mike Hilton is another good player that's still a free agent, and sure, you're not going to say to Mike Hilton that, hey, we're playing the Bengals today, I know you went up against Jamar Chase in practice every day each of the last 4 years, so go lock him up, but he is still a really solid player and a guy who absolutely deserves a roster spot in 2025. And one thing I think we can all agree on as football fans, no matter who we think the best team in the NFL is or any other topic we would butt heads on, it's that you can never have too many corners in today's era. Guys get hurt all the time, and having corner depth is critical, and not only is Hilton still a good player, but he's a smart veteran corner who's also really good in the run game that can only be viewed as a plus in today's game because of how much teams run the football. Defensive coordinators would rather get beat with an 11-play, 75-yard, slow, methodical drive than they would on one big play like we saw regularly in 2018 when Patrick Mahomes would find Tyreek Hill 45 yards down the field. And due to this, teams have played with a lot more too high safety looks and acknowledging that the run game is going to be more open so that they don't give up the explosive plays once or even twice a game. And this is where a guy like Mike Hilton comes in, who has played a lot of football over the past 8 years and a guy who's seen it all. He's also a very durable player, as the fewest amount of games he played in a season was 12 back in 2020. Hilton certainly isn't a perfect player, but he's a guy who should still play quite a bit during the 2025 season, and a guy I wouldn't be surprised at all if he signs with a contender right before the preseason. Next up is a pass rusher that had more pressures in 2024 than guys like TJ Watt, Max Crosby, Brian Burns, and Will Anderson, and it's 11th year pass rusher Zidarius Smith. Now, one big preface before we really dive into Zidarius Smith is Zidarius at this point in his career is more of a pass rush specialist. You do not want him as an every down player, and you don't want him out there on rundown specifically because unfortunately he does miss a lot of tackles in the run game, but if there's one thing he can do and still do at a high level based off of what we saw in 2024, in which he had 60 plus pressures and actually finished 12th in the NFL in pressures with 63 last year and had 9 sacks, it is to routinely get after the quarterback. And as we saw Philadelphia last year win the Super Bowl, if they did one thing well as a defense, and they did several things well, it was routinely get after the quarterback with 4 players. And Zidarius at this point in his career would be a tremendous Robin to another pass rusher's Batman, and if I were Zidarius at this point, I would like to think that he probably goes ring hunting when he chooses to sign with his next team. He is entering year 11 and he has 69 career sacks, and it's been a really nice career for the former 4th round pick, and this is also a player that has played 16 or more games in every season since 2018, with the exception of the 2021 season, in which he only played 1 game as he missed the rest of the year due to a back injury. So from 2022 through 2024, he's played in 16 or more games, and I would honestly say that in 2022, I would give him the perfect attendance nod despite missing a game, and it was because the Vikings had the division wrapped up entering week 18, and they played it smart as an organization and told Zidarius, you can go ahead and rest, and we don't need you this week because this game is more or less meaningless because we can't get the number 1 seed at this point in time. So for Zidarius Smith to still be a free agent, to me, is a player that would be an absolute steal at this point in free agency because he's a guy that can absolutely get after the quarterback at this point in his career and be a 45 or 50 pressure guy in 2025. And there is no coach in the NFL that would scoff or turn their head at a pass rusher getting 50 pressures this year and say, you know what, we're good, we don't need it, we have too much depth. But if you are a contender, why not give Zidarius Smith a call? Because you know in January, based on the last 3 years, he's going to have the durability to be there, and to me, Zidarius Smith is one of the best free agents still available. Next up is the definition of a dart throw in really every sense, and it's former Chargers corner Asante Samuel Jr. Samuel was a 2nd round pick out of Florida State back in 2021, and for what should be expected for a 2nd round pick, I thought Samuel had a solid tenure with the Chargers. Not bad, not great, but solid, and he only played in 4 games in 2024, and I was really hoping that he would have a good final year with the Chargers, that way he could really get a big payday this offseason, but unfortunately he only played 4 games due to what was disclosed as a shoulder injury, and we found out this offseason that it was due to a nerve injury and that he had neck surgery in April. And unfortunately, whenever you have a neck surgery, there's going to be NFL teams that do not mess with neck surgeries at all, and that they will take you entirely off of their free agency or draft board. Obviously, in this case, it would be free agency board. And because of the neck injury, there's going to be teams that have no interest in Samuel at all, but I still think there's going to be a handful of teams that want him to play for them in 2025. I think in the best case, he could be a really good number 2 corner, and the one thing that will always limit Asante Samuel Jr., unfortunately, is his tackling. He is not a big corner, and it definitely shows up at times, and there were also times where Brandon Staley would try and have him in the box a lot more than you would like a 180-pound corner in the box, and it definitely showed at times in the run game. But if you stick him outside, let him be a good number 2 corner, I think you have a player that could start for at least a year, if not 2, and that could be a low-risk, high-reward signing. And one of the biggest things that we go back to regularly on this channel is you can never have enough corner help, and you can never have enough pass rush help, and I do think at this point that Asante Samuel Jr., if he can play and get on the field regularly, that he will ultimately prove to be one of the biggest free agent steals from the 2025 class. Next up is running back J.K. Dobbins, who spent the 2024 season with the Los Angeles Chargers. I was a huge J.K. Dobbins fan in the draft process back in 2020 when he came out of Ohio State, and he had a really solid rookie season as he had over 900 total yards and 9 touchdowns. Unfortunately, Dobbins had a rough next couple of years as he tore his ACL in the final preseason game in 2021 and missed his entire 2nd season. He then suffered another knee injury in 2022, and pretty quickly we were looking at a player who suffered 2 season-ending injuries in the first 3 years of his career, who also plays a position that has a relatively short life as it is. Dobbins had 8 carries in Week 1 against the Texans in 2023 before tearing his Achilles tendon, and this all occurred before J.K. Dobbins turned 25 years old. Fortunately, he had a good year for the Chargers in 2024, as he had over 900 yards and 9 touchdowns and played like the J.K. Dobbins everyone knew he could have been when he was drafted back in 2020. Obviously, when you talk about J.K. Dobbins, you have to start with the injury history, and I get it, but this isn't a player where we're talking about what-ifs anymore. However, heading into the 2024 season, this was a guy who played just 9 games in the previous 2 years, and I think that was a major cause for concern. But Dobbins played 13 games last year and even started his Chargers tenure off with back-to-back 130-yard, 1 rushing touchdown games, and a bonus, the Chargers started the year 2-0. Now, because we are including J.K. Dobbins in a video in May talking about the best free agents still available, does that mean he can be a bell cow running back that can rush for 13 or 1,400 yards this year and take the league by storm? No, and unfortunately JK has the injury history to show for that. But I really do think Dobbins would be the best running back on the Bears, and a few other teams for that matter too. The injury history with J.K. Dobbins is where you have to be realistic, because no team should give him a large guaranteed contract at this point, because as we all know, the best ability is availability. But I would love for Dobbins to sign a contract with a team like the Bears, where he would have a legitimate chance to start, or even a contending team like the Bucs or the Bills to be a rotational back. And I know the Bills have decent draft capital in second-year player Ray Davis, but I think at this point in free agency, J.K. Dobbins is the epitome of a low-risk, high-reward signing, and he is just 26 years old, and I certainly hope we haven't seen the last of J.K. Dobbins. Guard Will Hernandez has been a starter since being drafted back in 2018 for the Giants, and has spent the last few years with the Arizona Cardinals. He will play this season at just 30 years old, and this is a guy who has over 90 career starts and a veteran who you would think would be around for the next few years. Unfortunately, he tore his ACL in Week 5 of the 2024 season, but this isn't a player who's barely scraped by throughout his time in the NFL. This is a solid pass-blocking guard who would be an upgrade for a lot of teams along the interior offensive line. Obviously, Hernandez isn't going to Canton, Ohio 5 years after he retires, but this is a player who, in my opinion, is a floor-raising guard. He could provide stability and, for a lot of teams, improve the offensive line too. I think at worst you'd be looking at a placeholder for a year before you try and draft a guard in the first 2 rounds of the 2026 draft, but for a player of Hernandez's caliber to still be a free agent when he's played in at least 13 games in every season of his career, minus a year in which he tore his ACL, which is kind of a freak injury and one you certainly can't control, to me is baffling. There's a lot of good interior defensive linemen in today's era, and there's far fewer good interior offensive linemen to counter what those guys bring to the table each and every Sunday. Hernandez will be just 30 in September, so I don't think it's unreasonable to say he could start somewhere for 2 years if he stays healthy. And with how thin O-line depth is in today's NFL, Will Hernandez is definitely one of the best free agents still available. We are sticking with another offensive lineman, and it's a player that I liked a lot coming out of college, and a player that after his rookie season, I would not have been surprised if he would make a Pro Bowl or 2 in his career, and it's former Browns offensive tackle Jedrick Wills. Browns fans have certainly grown frustrated with Jedrick over the past couple of years, and I completely understand why, and the main reason that Browns fans have grown frustrated with Jedrick over the past couple of years is that at times he makes business decisions, and there's certainly an argument to be made that he makes more business decisions than he probably should, and I think that's the biggest reason as to why he is still a free agent. I think all the tools are there for Jedrick, as at times he can really mirror pass rusher's ability. He has a good anchor, again, when he tries and when he really wants to dominate. There are flashes where he does, but unfortunately there are plays in the run game where you'd really like to see him put a defensive player on their rear end or really finish a block and play through the whistle, and unfortunately at times he doesn't. This is a player that I'd like to see Eagles offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland get his hands on just to see if there's something there. Jedrick is just 26 years old and is a former first-round pick, and the reality is former first-round picks get more chances over the course of time than other draft picks because they were selected that high for a reason. They were selected that high probably because they had a really dominant trait, or there was one specific part of that game where they were the best at in the draft class. And if Jeff Stoutland can't get anything out of him, then I would be willing to move on from Jedrick Wills and just be willing to accept that this was a player that never maximized his potential, due in large part to his decisions and ultimately the business decisions that he made week in and week out. Obviously, the concern with Jedrick Wills is effort, and that's been the case for the past couple of years. And if I were a GM that wanted to bring in a veteran body for training camp and to see what we have in a player in Jedrick Wills, I would give him a low guarantee deal with a lot of incentives and basically say, if you want to reach those incentives, then you're going to have to maximize your ability, and we're going to see if you can do that over the course of a 17-game season if you make a roster in the first place. Aaron Rodgers is, of course, one of the best free agents available as well, and he spent the 2024 season with the Jets, and I do think this is a case of where his numbers from the 2024 season look a lot better than how he actually played week in and week out. I don't think Aaron Rodgers was a bad player in 2024, but I also think we're at the point in his career where he's a lot more carefree and he slings the rock wherever he wants at any point in time, where earlier in his career he was very precise with every throw that he made, and there's a reason that he is the all-time leader in interception percentage. There's a reason that he had insane touchdown to interception ratio seasons, like in 2011 when he threw 45-6, or in 2020 when he threw 48-5, or even the following year when he threw 37-4. The receivers he threw to in the mid-2010s weren't bad, whether it was Jordy Nelson or Greg Jennings or Randall Cobb, or even in the late 2010s and Devontae Adams, and he was obviously the best of the bunch. But the point is Aaron Rodgers at this point is a much more carefree quarterback, and it showed on the tape that we saw last year. At this point, he is still without a doubt one of the best free agents available, and I would be pretty surprised if he's not a Pittsburgh Steeler in 2025, because there's not a lot of other destinations for him to go, and he obviously would not be a backup either. And given that Aaron Rodgers is 41 years old and will be 42 in December, I also think there's this unspoken rule that, hey, we want you on the team, here's the playbook, we just don't want to go through the BS and the drama of you not showing up to OTAs and everything that ensued last year with the Jets and have to deal with all of that drama. So I do think Aaron Rodgers will eventually be a Steeler, as I don't think the Steelers are dumb enough to go into the season with just Mason Rudolph and Will Howard, and I do think Aaron Rodgers will be a Steeler and that it's just a matter of time. I do want to give a shout out to Rasul Douglas as well, as he certainly applies to today's video. But that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video as it helps tremendously with YouTube algorithm. And we are also closing in on 200,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.